Good morning, church family. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Sunday morning Bible class at the Broad Street Church of Christ. For the last 4 months, we have been seeking to answer the question, does archaeology support the Bible? In particular, does it support the book of Genesis? Last week, we completed our discussion of Genesis chapter 25. We discussed the birth of Isaac's twin sons, Esau and Jacob. The two boys grew up. Chapter 5 ended with Esau giving up his birthright to Jacob for some bread and a bowl of lentil stew. There are no place names in Genesis chapters 26 through 30 that we haven't already talked about. So this week, we will begin in chapter 31. We find Isaac's son Jacob in Haran, the Hebrews pronounce it Karan, a place that we talked about in detail in week 5 and mentioned in passing last week. Jacob has worked for his uncle Laban for 14 years to earn his 2 daughters' hands in marriage. He then continued to work for his uncle for another 6 years to obtain flocks of goats, sheep, camels, and donkeys, as well as male and female servants. Jacob leaves Karan to return to his father Isaac in Canaan. He takes with him his 2 wives, Leah and Rebekah, his wives' servants, his sons, and his flocks. He leaves without telling his uncle that he's leaving. Unbeknownst to Jacob, Rachel, his wife, steals her father's household gods. 3 days later, Uncle Laban pursues the entourage. And that leads us to verse 23 and the next slide. Taking his relatives with him, the his there refers to Laban, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. So we have a new place name referred to as the hill country of Gilead. Obviously, this is not a city or a town or a village, so we won't be discussing any archaeology, maybe a little bit of geography, though. We need to try to identify this region that is being discussed before we move on. In Hebrew, Gilead means stones of testimony or stones of witness. It's likely a reference to the stones that Jacob and Laban piled together as a testimony of their agreement as described in Genesis chapter 31, verses 45 and 46. This implies that Jacob named the region. In some English translations, the word is spelled G-A-L-E-E-D, pronounced Galeed. Gilead and Galeed have the same meanings in Hebrew. The name Yegar Sahaduta, which the Armenian Laban used for the same place in verse 47, also means stones of testimony in Armenian. Gilead, or Galeed, is the ancient name of the mountainous part of the region of the Transjordan, in present-day Jordan. The region is bounded in the west by the Jordan River, in the north by the river Yarmouk, and in the southwest by the region of Moab near the Dead Sea. The eastern boundary is not well defined, but the region would at a minimum contain the mountain range as shown in the slide. The phrase Gilead is mentioned 122 times in the Old Testament. It's not mentioned at all in the New Testament. 97 times the phrase Gilead is used to denote a region east of the Jordan River. 9 times Gilead is used in the phrase land of Gilead. 5 times Gilead is used in the phrase hill country of Gilead. 5 other times Gilead is used in the phrase towns of Gilead. 1 time Gilead is used in the phrase Mount Gilead, which ironically enough is not located in Gilead. And 14 times, Gilead is used to reference one or more persons. By the time frame of the New Testament, the northern part of Gilead is part of the Decapolis region, and the southern part, opposite of Jericho, is called Perea. Any questions about Gilead before I move on? Okay. So we'll move on to the next verse in the chapter. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today." That is why it's called Gilead. It was also called Mitzpah, because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. So we have a new place name in verse 49 of Mitzpah, which is located in the region of Gilead. In Hebrew, Mitzpah means watchtower or lookout, and is likely a reference to the stones placed there by Jacob and Laban and the Lord's watch over the two of them. Now, in the Bible, there are 4 distinct Mitzpahs located in the discussed in the, excuse me, located in the Old Testament. The first one, which I have highlighted right out here in this region of Gilead, is the Mitzpah of Gilead, mentioned here in Genesis chapter 31 as the meeting place between Jacob and Laban. This Mitzpah is also mentioned in Joshua 13:26 as part of the allotment of land to the tribe of Gad. This Mitzpah is mentioned again in Judges chapters 10, 11, and 12 as the hometown of Jephthah, a judge who presided over Israel for 6 years. There is a Mitzpah of Benjamin located here, which is the most prominent Mitzpah in the Old Testament. It's located at number 2 on the map and is about 12 miles north and west of Jerusalem. 1 Samuel chapter 10 states that Samuel anointed Saul as king of Israel at this Mitzpah. Joshua chapter 18 lists Mitzpah as one of the cities excuse me, allocated to the tribe of Benjamin after the Israeli conquest of Canaan. Mitzpah is mentioned as a gathering place for all the tribes of Israel in 1 Samuel chapter 7 and in Judges chapters 20 and 21. 1 Kings chapters 15 and 2 Chronicles chapter 16 tells us that King Asa of Judah fortified the town of this Mitzpah as a defense against the northern kingdom of Israel during the divided monarchy period. Excuse me. 2 Kings chapter 25 and Jeremiah chapters 40 and 41 tell us that this Mitzpah of Benjamin becomes the capital of the Babylonian-controlled region of Judah. Finally, Nehemiah chapter 3 tells us that several men from Mitzpah helped the reconstruction of the walls of Jericho after the Babylonian exile. First Samuel chapter 22 tells us that there's a Mitzpah of Moab, which is located at number 3 here on the map. David places his parents there for safety under the protection of King of Moab while he was on the run from King Saul. Joshua chapter 15 tells us that there was a Mitzpah of Judah, which is located at number 4 on the map. This town was allocated to the tribe of Judah after the Israeli conquest of Canaan. So back to Genesis chapter 31 and the Mitzpah of Gilead at map location number 1. The exact location of this Mitzpah is still being debated amongst historians and archaeologists. We know it was not a town or a city at the time of Jacob, and it became a town during or before the time of the Israeli conquest of Canaan. So we will move on. This completes chapter 31, and we'll move on to chapter 32. Starting with verses 1 and 2. Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named this place Mahanaim. Verse 2 gives us this new name, place name of Mahanaim. It's pronounced Mahanaim in English, but in Hebrew it's pronounced Mahanaim. I'm going to use the English pronunciation because it's easier. Mahanaim in Hebrew means two camps. It appears to refer to the location where Jacob's camp and the camp of God's angels were located. I hope you can see that red dot. Most archaeologists believe that the biblical Mahanaim is located at Tel Ed Dahab El Garbi. Don't you love Arabic? In present-day Jordan. In Arabic, Ed Dahab means twin hills of gold, and El Garbi means the west. Combining the two, we have the western twin of the hills of gold. And this Tel is located right on the Jarbak River, right here at a ford, which is used to cross the river. Turns out that there are two archaeological sites at El Dahab, one on the western hill and one on the eastern hill. The two hills are separated by the present-day Zarqa River, known in the Old Testament as the Jabbok River. This is the Jarbak River, and it flows around like that, forms an S, comes around like that, and this picture doesn't show it, but then it comes back around like this and goes this way. So this part here juts out, causes the river to go around it. Archaeologists identify the eastern hill as the biblical city of Peniel, this one here. And this is the western hill of Mahanaim. We'll talk about Peniel in the next site after we're finished with Mahanaim. In Hebrew, Peniel means, pen means face, and El means God. So Peniel means the face of God. Looking at this aerial photo, we can easily see where the name Mahanaim, or two camps, came from. Imagine Jacob's camp on this western hill here, and the camp of God's angels on this hill here. Two camps, two hills, Mahanaim. This slide, when I'm finished, will list the biblical history of Mahanaim. Mahanaim is mentioned 14 times in the Bible. Mahanaim is mentioned once in Genesis chapter 32, verse 2, as the place where Jacob sets up a camp nearby a camp of God's angels. As I stated earlier, Mahanaim in Hebrew means two camps. Note that the Bible does not call the place a city or a town or a village. It calls it a place that Jacob names. Therefore, we don't expect archaeology to find a settlement here dating to the time of the patriarchs. Verse 22 tells us that Jacob's camp was next to the river Jabbok. Verse 30 tells us that the place was next to another place that Jacob names Peniel. By the way, Peniel is spelled two different ways. Just be aware of that. Yes? What his path was? So I'm going to back up. his camp, his first camp, the camp where he stayed the night, was here, and he crossed over right like this. He uses this area right here as later to cross over with all of his wives, his children, his livestock, etc. And then it's here where he wrestles with the angel, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. This is not where. His father, oh yes, and that was in Mitzpah or in Gilead on the previous slide. And if I back up, that side will work. So where he met his father-in-law was up here north, and so this is a couple days later. He's now down here. Ultimately, he's trying to get to Shechem, which is over here. So there's he's going to ford. First, he's going to ford here, and then he's going to ford over here to get to Shechem. But he's not there yet. We got a couple of stories to get to before that happens. Having a hard time hearing you. So his father-in-law meets him over here, and yes, he's crossed this river, which is called the Yarmuk, I believe. He's crossed this river, and he's over here in the hill country of Gilead at Mitzpah, which is somewhere over here. The exact location isn't quite known. And then a couple of days later, after his father-in-law leaves, he comes down here and he's going to set up camp here and spend the night before he crosses another river. And then a day or two later, actually several days later, he's going to cross the Jordan to get over to Shechem. Any other questions? Yes?
Were there bridges, or did they
No.
actually have to go through the water?
They went through the water.
Lovely.
No bridges. And of course, all the cattle, the sheep, the goats, the camels, the donkeys, all of them have to cross over. So they're going to naturally look for a place where the water is slow moving and not very deep. And this fits the bill. You can see that this is a very rugged area, and crossing the river is not going to be easy. So you got to find a place to do it. And I don't know why I'm pointing over there. You guys can't see this. This right here is a great place to cross. And so that's why that occurs there. It's not wide, and it happens to be shallow. And when you're talking about water like this, when it's narrow, it's typically fast, and when it's wide, it's typically slow. This happens to be a narrow, slow place, so that works out great if you're trying to cross. Okay. I think I've already covered that slide. Mahanaim is mentioned in Joshua chapter 13, verse 26, as a southern border town of the territory Moses gave the tribe of Gad. This is repeated in 1 Chronicles chapter 6. In Joshua chapter 13, verse 30, this Mahanaim is again mentioned as the northern border town of the territory Moses gave to the half-tribe of Manasseh. So Gad gets the north part, Manasseh gets everything south of Mahanaim. In Joshua chapter 21, verse 38, Mahanaim is designated as a Levitical town in the territory of the tribe of Gad. So Gad gets the territory, but the Levites get the town. Note that all four verses, Mahanaim is referred to as a town during the time of the Israeli conquest of Canaan. So that'll have an impact on the archaeology when we get there. Mahanaim is mentioned 3 times in 2 Samuel chapter 2. After King Saul's death, his son Ishbosheth, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, goes to Mahanaim and is crowned king of Israel, while David is crowned king of Judah at Hebron. Ishbosheth reigns for 2 years from Mahanaim before he is killed by his own men. Mahanaim is mentioned twice in 2 Samuel chapter 17, and once again in chapter 19, and once again in 1 Kings chapter 2 as a refuge for King David when his son Absalom leads a rebellion against him. In chapter 18, verse 4, King David stands by the gate as his armies march out. And again in chapter 19, David sits in the gate, encouraging his men as they return. So towns that have gates are no longer towns, they're cities. So at this point, at the time of King David, Mahanaim is a city. Mahanaim is mentioned once in 1 Kings chapter 4 as one of the 12 district administrative centers of King Solomon's kingdom. And lastly, the dance of Mahanaim is mentioned in the Song of Songs, chapter 6, verse 13. And I'll be honest, I have no clue what the dance of Mahanaim is, only that it's there in Song of Songs. There are no mentions of Mahanaim in the Bible after the United Monarchy period. And this slide is a list of the archaeological studies that were done at Tulail ad Duhab. Tulail is the Arabic term for the plural form of Tel. So in English and Arabic, Hebrew, Tel is an archaeological site. Tulail is a plural. There's two archaeological sites there. Between 1876 and 77, the American archaeologist Selah Merrill of the American Palestine Exploration Society conducted a survey of both sites at Tel ad Duhab and published his findings in 1881 in a book titled East of the Jordan, a record of exploration. So archaeologists have known about these sites for quite some time. Between 1980, so it took 100 years, between 1980 and 82, American archaeologists Robert L. Gordon and Linda E. Villers conducted another survey and published a map of the ruins visible above the grounds. So 100 years later, a second survey is done. Another 25 years go by, and between 2005 and 2016, German archaeologist Thomas Pola conducted yearly excavations in collaboration with the Jordanian Department of Antiquities. His group has found 3 settlement phases on the Western Hill believed to be the biblical Mahanaim. The earliest settlement dates back to the Israeli conquest period and lasts through the United Monarchy period. Among these ruins were found carved images of a decorated lion's head, a woman with a goat, and 2 women each playing a harp. This suggested to the archaeologists that this was sort of a banquet scene. And this also suggests that the settlement was some sort of a palace or governmental compound. A second settlement dates back to the Hellenistic period. Excuse me. The archaeologists noted that most of this layer was destroyed by the construction of the youngest settlement. The youngest layer dates back to the Roman period, around the time of Herod the Great. Coins found at this site corroborate the time frame. Also found at the southwestern foot of the Western Hill was a very small settlement site. He said it looked a lot like a campsite. Charcoal fragments found at that site date back to the time frame of the Patriots. Now, I'm not saying that that's charcoal from Jacob's fire. He didn't say that, but it dates back to that time frame.
What does Duhab mean?
Hills of gold. It's an Arabic term, hills of gold. Actually, it's twin hills of gold.
Twin hills of gold. So is that literally gold, or is it the color, or?
Good question, because I did do a little bit of look to see if any gold had ever been found there, and if there has, it's not been reported. Now, that region a little bit to the east, there are places of gold deposits that have been found, but whether gold has ever been found in those two hills, there was really no evidence there was any digging there before the archaeologists got there. Before I start doing the comparison, there's one other historical or archaeological thing I want to talk about. Previously, I've shown you a similar slide of the annals of Pharaoh Thutmose III, Pharaoh of Egypt, who ruled Egypt between 1504 and 1450 BC. That slide showed his military campaigns posted at the Temple of Ammon in Karnak, Egypt. Well, Thutmose III is not the only pharaoh who recorded his military victories in the walls of the Temple of Karnak. Shown here is a portion of the Annals of Shishak at the Karnak Temple. Shishak reigned from approximately 945 to 924 BC. He conducted a military campaign into Judea and Israel in 926 BC. The records at Karnak list over 150 places he claims to have conquered in this campaign. Mahanaim is listed as one of the places he conquered. And you may recall when we talked about King Thutmose's annal, these are pictures of kings of various cities, and they got their hands tied behind their back, and they're carrying a shield, and on the shield is a cartouche of the name of the city. And that's how we know that the places where he claims to have conquered. So he copied what Thutmose III did at the temple there in Karnak. Any questions? By the way, those aren't the other two. There are other pharaohs who've done the same thing. Okay, so let's do a comparison of the biblical history and the archaeological findings. The Bible in Genesis chapter 32 tells us that Mahanaim was a place that the patriarch Jacob named. There was no city, town, or village, just two campsites near the Jabbok River. Archaeology confirms that there was no settlement at Mahanaim at the time of the patriarchs. Same thing's true of Peniel, the other hill. Interestingly, though, a site at the foot of the hill near the river, researchers found some charcoal from a fire that was carbon-14 dated to the patriarch's area. Did this come from a campfire? No way to know for certain. The Bible in the books of Joshua and 1 Chronicles tells us that the Mahanaim was a border town of the tribe of Gad and was designated as a Levitical town after the Israeli conquest of Canaan. Archaeology confirms that a settlement existed at Mahanaim dating to the Israeli conquest of Canaan. This settlement lasted and was improved on several times through the United Monarchy era. The Bible, in the book of 2 Samuel, tells us that Mahanaim served as a temporary capital city of Israel for 2 years under the reign of King Saul's son, Ishbosheth. Also, the books of 2 Samuel and 1 King tells us that King David used Mahanaim as a refuge and temporary capital city when his son Absalom led a rebellion against him. In addition, the book of 1 Kings tells us that Mahanaim was a district administrative center, one of 12, during the reign of King Solomon. Archaeology confirms that a palace or governmental compound existed at Mahanaim during the United Monarchy era. Mahanaim is not mentioned in the Bible during the divided monarchy era. Archaeology tells us that the site was abandoned during the divided monarchy era. Mahanaim is not mentioned in the Bible during the Hellenistic era. Archaeology tells us that the site was reestablished during the Hellenistic era. However, much of the remains of that era were destroyed to build the Roman era site. Mahanaim is not mentioned in the Bible during the Roman era. Archaeology tells us that the site was reestablished during the Roman era, especially around the time of Herod the Great. So in summary, archaeology supports the Bible's claims of the existence of Mahanaim during the relevant time periods. So we'll move on to the next verse with the place name, and that is in verse 30. Before I get there, I need to set the stage. This is a painting of Jacob wrestling with the angel by Alexander Lelore. And I know nothing about art, so I just pulled this off the web. To set the stage for verse 30, I'm going to read verses 22 through 29. That night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all of his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel," pardon me, "because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. Quick note here. In Hebrew, the name Jacob means the supplanter. It's not generally considered a nice name. The name Israel in Hebrew means one who struggles with God. In essence, the angel gave Jacob a better Hebrew name. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." So Genesis 32:20 gives us a new place name of Peniel. In Hebrew, Peniel means face of God. Pen is face, and El is God, so face of God. Most archaeologists identify the eastern hill of Tulil ad-Duhab as the biblical Peniel. Given its proximity to Mahanaim, it appears to be the right place. Unfortunately, not enough archaeological excavation has been conducted there to compare with the biblical history of Peniel. So I'm not going to go over the biblical history of Peniel. I'm going to move on. This completes chapter 32, and we'll move on to chapter 33. The sun rises, and Jacob leaves Peniel. Shortly thereafter, he sees his brother Esau coming towards him. They meet, embrace, and wept. Jacob introduces his wives and his children to Esau. Jacob gives Esau a portion of his flock as a gift to find favor. Esau accepts. Esau then returns to his hill country of Seir. Jacob tells Esau that he will follow behind slowly so that he can care for his flock, but instead he goes elsewhere. And that brings us to verses 16 and 17. So that day, Esau started on his way back to Seir. Excuse me. Jacob, however, went to Succoth, where he built a place for himself and made shelters for livestock. That is why the place is called Succoth. So Genesis 33, verses 16 and 17 gives us two place names, Seir and Succoth. I'll briefly talk about Seir first. I talked about the hill country of Seir back in week 11 in conjunction with the military raid of the 4 Mesopotamian kings into the Transjordan area. Seir and the valley of Siddim, as described in Genesis chapter 14. I showed you this map. This is a topographical map of the southeast portion of the modern-day Israel. Israel comes here from the coast and comes down like in a V to this Gulf of Aqaba here, and then back up to here. So this is Israel. Jordan is, this part comes down to about here. Saudi Arabia starts here, and this is Egypt over here. This in green, I don't know how well you can see that compared to this other green, but this is the hill country of Seir. There are 2 mountain ranges in this hill country. There's this eastern mountain range, which starts way up here and comes down all the way to, actually it comes all the way, it goes all the way down. And then there's the second western ridge. It starts with the Judean hills up here and then ends here. And then this is a desert plain. So there's the western hill and the eastern. At the time of Abraham, the hill country of Seir was inhabited by the Horites. Genesis 36, 20, 30 states that Seir was the father of the Horites. About 200 years later, at the time of Jacob, the descendants of Jacob's brother Esau, the Edomites, destroyed the remaining Horites and took over the land, as explained in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 12 and 22. In our current study, in Genesis chapter 33, Esau, after meeting with Jacob near where the Jacob River meets with the Jordan River, leaves that area to return to the home country of Seir. Yes, sir. So between Abraham and Jacob is roughly 200 years. So all throughout the Old Testament, well, actually, I was wrong about what I was going to say. So it's first called the land of Seir after Seir and all of his relatives. Esau's relatives come in, they kick out the folks of Seir, but they continue to call that area both Seir and Edom. So it has 2 names. Eventually, by the end of the Old Testament, it's only called Edom. But right now, it has 2 names, Seir and Edom. Probably because that's what Moses' audience at the time he wrote Genesis would understand. It was called Seir in Abraham's time. Any other questions? I heard the first bell, and my note says this would be a good place to stop with 10 minutes left to go. So I think we'll stop here, and I'll pick up here next week. Thank you. Let's get ready for our worship service.